Chapter 9. It was fairly late when they got to Cleveland, nearly 9 o'clock that evening. They found a hotel with rooms available, and Tucker got them a small suite on the 10th floor. "I think we should stay together," he told Sarah, "but at least in these suites there's a separate bedroom to give you a little privacy." Sarah didn't argue. She was slightly surprised that he wanted them to be together now when, presumably, they had a bit of breathing room. When things had been a lot more tense en route to Chicago, he had gotten them separate rooms, keeping a careful distance, she'd assumed. She didn't know what his reasoning was now, and was too tired to think much about it. The hotel had an underground garage, which was one reason Tucker had chosen it. Their Jeep would have a bit more security than if it were parked out in the open, and it would certainly be less visible to passers-by. It was also a fairly busy hotel with people coming and going. It was hosting some kind of business convention, and that made it a virtual certainty that there would be people about at all hours. The suite turned out to be a nice one with a spacious sitting room that had a sleeper sofa, which Tucker matter-of-factly claimed for his bed, a couple of good chairs, a desk, and a comfortable bedroom with a king-size bed. Sarah barely noticed. Travel-weary and just plain tired, all she wanted was to take a long, hot shower and get ready for bed. Tucker told her to go ahead while he plugged his laptop in to charge the battery, while his system continued gathering the information that might help them. "Aren't you tired?" "Yeah, but too wound up to sleep just yet. I need to wind down, and I'll sleep better if I work on this for a while." He looked at her searchingly. "It's been hours since we stopped for supper. I think I'll order some soup and sandwiches from room service, okay?" "Fine." She was surprised to find herself a little hungry. Tucker had been feeding her at regular intervals, and she was beginning to get used to it. Leaving him in the sitting room, she went and took a luxuriously long and hot shower. It felt wonderful. She washed her hair with shampoo thoughtfully provided by the hotel, and as she stood at the vanity, drying it with the dryer also provided, she reflected with a bit of rueful humor that someone really should publish a self-help book on what to pack for an indeterminate journey on the run for one's life. Moisturizer, for example, should go into every woman's survival kit. You couldn't always count on a hotel to provide it after all, when you could even stay at a hotel, of course, and a nice bottle of bubble bath for those rare occasions when a few precious minutes could be spent soothing a travel-weary body. And a small makeup bag and a bottle of pleasing perfume would certainly come in handy when you were traveling with a man, a nice man, a sexy man. Idiot, get him out of your head. The only sleeper Sarah had brought with her was something styled like a man's button-up, cuffed sleeve shirt. It was fairly short, reaching just below the middle of her thighs and rather sheer. She looked at her reflection on the back of the bathroom door and sighed. Too pale and still too thin, despite Tucker's regular meals. She looked almost anemic, and the stark white sleep shirt didn't help. My kingdom for some blush and lipstick, a touch of foundation, something. This faint spurt of self-derisive humor faded. She leaned her forehead against the cool mirror for a moment and closed her eyes. Her head was hurting, throbbing. It was almost like a sinus headache, an aching pressure behind her eyes, but she knew it wasn't sinus. It was this thing inside her, this thing that had been born in violence 6 months before. It was growing. Tucker hadn't understood when she'd told him that. She knew he hadn't. How could he? How could anyone know what it was like to have something alien inside you? Something that was part of you and yet not under your control, not normal. "Go away," she whispered. For a moment, she could have sworn the pressure inside her head increased as if in protest, and far back in her mind, she thought she heard the echo of a whisper. Sarah. Fate, destiny. Sarah lifted her head away from the mirror and opened her eyes. They looked very bright and shiny and felt hot. But she refused to let the tears fall. She locked them inside her and angrily wished they'd drown that thing that kept growing, that thing that wouldn't go away and leave her in peace. Then she squared her shoulders and left the bathroom, reluctant to let Tucker see her looking so damn ghost-like and insubstantial. Sarah put on one of the bulky terry cloth robes also provided by the hotel. It was also white, which hardly lent her any color, but at least it made her look less in need of care and feeding. Even so, he looked at her for an unnervingly long moment when Sarah went back into the sitting room, just a couple of minutes after room service had arrived. But all he said, lightly, was, "Feeling better?" Much. Good. Here, I had the waiter leave the cart in the room so we can use it as our table. The food occupied them for some time, but finally Sarah nodded toward the laptop set up on the desk and asked, "Find anything yet?" "More of the same so far." He leaned back in his chair and frowned slightly. "I'm still sorting through all the information the computer gathered while we were at the lake. Every news item just seems to confirm what we believe, that someone is abducting young psychics and killing older ones. There are some exceptions, of course. I've read articles on at least a couple of very young psychics who seem to be doing fine, and a number of articles about older psychics who have been in the news more than once." "So what does that tell us?" "I'm damned if I know. Unless it's a question of genuine versus phony. Maybe all the ones still alive and kicking just didn't satisfy whatever criteria the other side is using to determine the real from the fake." Sarah thought about it. "Can you set up your computer to look for a pattern? I mean, in case there's something we're just not seeing?" Tucker nodded. "When we have more information, sure. I'll probably have to write the program, but that won't take too long. In the meantime, I'm also starting a list of psychics who don't appear to be under any kind of threat, and I'll narrow that list to those living in the Northeast." "You still believe we should approach one?" "I think we have to try, Sarah. We'll be as careful as we can in choosing who to approach and how we approach them." "How do we know we're being careful?" "Good question," he said ruefully. "The only answer I have is we do the best we can. Maybe the computer will provide us with something useful. Maybe your senses and instincts will kick in, or maybe in the end, we'll just have to wing it." Sarah sipped her decaf for a moment, then said slowly, "We can only gather information about those people who have been in the news or some kind of official report. Tucker, don't you think there are probably people out there who have successfully hidden their abilities? I mean, I would have, if it hadn't hit me so suddenly and so hard at first that I blurted things out without caring who was listening. If I'd had my druthers, nobody would ever have found out about me." "I'm sure there are others out there who think that way," he agreed. "And maybe they've escaped notice. But it means the same thing to us as it does to the other side. Those psychics will be virtually impossible to find. Unless the other side has ways of finding them besides the media and official reports." "Right." She nodded. "I can't help wondering about them, though. The ones that might be hiding out there. What if they're so quiet because they know what's going on?" "That could be." She felt a little chill and unconsciously drew the lapels of the robe more closely together. The throbbing behind her eyes intensified. I just had this unsettling feeling that there are people moving all around us, and that they know what the hell's going on. That if we only knew who to ask, it would all start to make some kind of sense. Tucker smiled slightly, his gaze intent on her face. I have a lot of faith in your feelings. Maybe, he hesitated, then said, Sarah, maybe if you concentrate on those feelings, if you open yourself to them, you'll be able to sense some information the computer could never provide. Sarah set her cup down on the table and stared at it. Lovely pattern, roses. Unusual since most hotels stuck with utilitarian white. Sarah? I don't know how to do that. Her head throbbed. I think you do. Now I think you do. Softly, starkly, she said, I'm afraid to do that. I know. Her gaze lifted to meet his, and she realized that he did know. But he didn't understand, not really. He still didn't understand. She managed a faint smile. Can't help being a coward, you know. It's the way I'm made. You aren't a coward. Sure I am. Do you think I'd be doing all this if you weren't with me? I'm leaning on your strength, Tucker, and your confidence, and your belief that somehow we can change a future burned into my mind. Left alone, I'd still be back in Richmond, waiting to die. Tucker shook his head. You are not a coward, Sarah. You were blindsided by all this, and it shook you off your balance. But there's nothing faint-hearted in you. A coward would never have left Richmond with me or anyone else. A coward wouldn't have survived, with astonishing calm, by the way, seeing men come to kill her on 2 separate occasions. She didn't believe him, but shrugged slightly. If you say so. But I know what's inside me, and right now there's little but fear. Fear can help you. Every soldier knows that, Sarah. It can keep your instincts and your senses sharp, keep you alert to danger, and it doesn't make you a coward. It does if it keeps you from acting. I'm afraid to open myself up, to deliberately try to look into dark places I'd rather not see. She got up abruptly and went over to the window. The curtains were partially drawn, but through the narrow opening she looked out on city lights. It looked very cold out there, and she felt very alone. Softly she added, I'm really afraid to do that. Sarah. He was behind her, too close, but there was nowhere she could go. She was trapped. The hot throbbing behind her eyes was like an alien heartbeat. In a voice that was suddenly harsh and angry, she said, You have no idea how it feels, none at all. I told you once at the lake, but you didn't listen. There's something inside me, Tucker, something alien, and it's growing. It whispers to me, telling me what I should do and how I should feel, and I don't trust it. Sarah. You think it's just another tool, like your laptop, something you can use to get information. Push the right button and get what you want. She did turn and look at him then, through hot eyes, and her voice was low and strained. But it's not that easy. It's like claws inside me. Do you understand that? Something alive and struggling and hurting me. Every bit of information I manage to tear free leaves bloody wounds behind it. How long do you think it'll be before I bleed to death? Sarah. Leave me alone. She avoided his intent gaze and tried to move around him, but he was too close. You've been alone too damn long. He put his hands on her shoulders to keep her still. Sarah, you're right. I can't even imagine what it's like, and I make my living imagining things." His voice was low, steady. "But I can understand fear. And the only thing I know for sure about fear is that we have to face what frightens us. We have to. Otherwise it can cripple us." "Then I'm crippled." "Not yet. You're only crippled if you let yourself be." She looked up at him, feeling so nakedly vulnerable that it actually hurt. "Everything I've seen has been darkness, violence, death. I don't want to see that anymore, Tucker." His hands tightened. "Then don't look for death or violence. Try to control it, Sarah. Ask yourself a specific mental question and concentrate on finding the answer to only that." "I don't know if it'll work. I'm not psychic, so I can't know that. But I know the mind is an incredible instrument, one that can be focused and fine-tuned, one that can be controlled. I believe you can do that, if you try." Sarah didn't know if she could try. What she did know was that she didn't want to, and she knew she was too weary to be standing here this close to Tucker. She knew that tonight it would be all too easy to make a mistake. She wanted him to put his arms around her and hold her. She wanted him to kiss her again. She wanted him to hold the darkness at bay. She wanted him. But Tucker had made it clear to her that he considered their brief kiss at the lake a mistake. He had avoided even the most casual touch since then, and he had withdrawn so completely from her that Sarah found it difficult to gauge even his mood, much less his thoughts. Even now, with his hands on her, all she sensed from him was wariness and reserve. And even knowing that, even being painfully sure that he didn't want her, she still wanted him. Before she started clinging to him like an idiot and made a total fool of herself, she carefully drew back away from him until his hands released her. "I'm really tired," she said. "I think I'll turn in." She was at the door of the sitting room before it occurred to her that he would have to go through the bedroom in order to get to the bathroom. She paused and looked back at him. "Don't worry about disturbing me when you need to use the bathroom. I sleep like the dead." Still standing at the window, Tucker merely nodded. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night." Sarah tried not to think very much after that. She pushed the bedroom door to, but didn't completely close it. She thoughtfully left a light on in the bathroom when she was finished in there so that Tucker would be able to see his way. Then she shed the robe, climbed into the huge bed, and turned off the lamp. She wanted to sleep, to just close her eyes and let everything stop for a while. She needed that. But when she closed her eyes, the worries and questions and thoughts refused to stop. Who are they? Try to control the thing inside you. Try to see something to help us. Why are psychics so important or such a threat to them? There isn't much time left, I feel that. Why did this have to happen to me? All I see is death. Tucker needs to find Lydia. Am I going to die? Am I going mad? Finally, even though she knew she was too tired and afraid to make the attempt, Sarah concentrated on closing out everything except one single vitally important question. Who are they? She fixed it in her mind until it was so clear that she could see the letters of each word. Then, hesitantly and very afraid, she tried to open up her mind, her senses, and invite the answer to come. At first, all Sarah saw was a question bright as neon. Gradually, though, the question dimmed, and all around it the blackness lightened. She saw a large, featureless building very briefly, just the flash of the image, but it made her skin crawl. as if she stood briefly at the mouth of a dark cave where something unspeakably brutish dwelled. Then she heard the low murmur of many voices, what they were saying indistinguishable, but rousing in her another powerful primitive response as the hairs on the back of her neck stirred a warning. Wrong. It was all wrong, worse than bad. Then she saw the shadows. There were many, all shapes and sizes, tall and thin, short and squat, man-like and bestial. Nightmare shapes. They moved rapidly, flitting across her inner field of vision with an energy and purpose that was chilling. Arms reaching out, hands grasping something. She couldn't see what they were doing, couldn't see what it was they caught and held so avidly. She couldn't see their faces. She couldn't see their faces. Panicked, Sarah wrenched herself out of it without even realizing she was going to. When her eyes opened, she found herself sitting up in bed, her heart pounding, and breathing rapid and shallow, as if she had awakened from a nightmare. Was that it? Had her psychic abilities actually shown her something that was real? Or had her fears and worries simply been given frightening shape by her anxious mind? She didn't have the same sense that a vision left her with, that what she had seen was real. There was no feeling in her of inevitability. Instead, what she felt was a profound but wordless and nameless uneasiness, a fear that was purely instinctive, like the primal response to snakes and spiders and noises in the night. Sarah wanted badly to get out of bed and go into the sitting room to Tucker. She wanted to tell him what she thought she had seen and how it made her feel. She wanted to hear him tell her that there was nothing to be afraid of and everything would be all right. But she didn't, of course. Instead, she lay back on the pillow and tried to reassure herself. You're a grown-up and hardly as weak as you've been acting. You've got to stop leaning on him. Even if you survive this, he won't always be around. Think about it. Figure it out. It had likely only been the frightened musings of her mind, and even if it hadn't been, even if she had actually been able to tap into some kind of psychic awareness, what had she seen? Nothing really. A building, some shadows, distorted as shadows always were, without a clear shape or texture, and scaring her because she didn't know why. Because shadows scared her. Because her world had been turned upside down and everything seemed to scare her these days. Her head was throbbing, the pressure behind her eyes building. That alien thing in her head was growing. Tucker pushed the room service cart out into the hallway, then settled down at the desk with coffee and his laptop. But he didn't turn his attention to the computer immediately. Instead, he brooded. Here he was in a hotel suite with a woman he hadn't known a week, on the run, possibly, for his life and hers, grappling with a puzzle, the enormity of which was the stuff of paranoid fantasies. And he had hardly bothered to stop a moment and ask himself why. The simple answer, of course, was that he wanted her to tell him about Lydia, and that was certainly the reason he had first sought her out. But from the moment he had elected to spend the night on the couch outside her bedroom because a watcher with unknown motives lurked in the dark night, he had turned a corner, and from that point there had really been no going back. None of his friends, he thought, would be surprised to find him involved in something so bizarre. He had a reputation for getting hip-deep in things purely out of intellectual curiosity and the love of challenge, which was undoubtedly one of his motivations in this case. It was a puzzle to end all puzzles, that was for sure. But it was more than that, much more. During the past days, he had realized that he was with Sarah because he wanted to protect her and knew that he could. He'd been certain of that. What he hadn't known was whether he could save her. Now, especially, he was conscious of doubts he'd never felt before. This thing was so big, so bizarre, and so clearly deadly. Sarah was already in more pain than he had bargained for. Pain that promised to get worse before it got better. If it got better. And there was an added complication now. No matter how wary her abilities made him, the undeniable fact was that Tucker was having a tough time keeping his distance. He was so aware of her all the time, so conscious of her every movement, of the sound of her voice and the fleeting expressions that crossed her face. He wanted to touch her. He wanted to wake up next to her. But he couldn't deny that he hadn't come to terms with her abilities. After so many years of charlatans, the real thing had definitely thrown him off balance. And he also couldn't deny that even if Sarah felt something for him, and he had no idea whether she did, she was in no shape physically or emotionally to take a lover. He didn't think she was quite so fragile as she had been days ago, but at times, especially when she was tired, she still seemed to him too frail and shut in herself to be able to go on much longer. When he looked at her, he had the sense of something almost ethereal, unreal, as if some delicate creature of myth and legend had drifted out of the mist and into his life. That's the C-E-L-T in me. Or maybe just the writer, steeped in mythology and legend, shaping daydreams in the mind and giving them form on paper. That man could easily imagine Sarah as an elf or fairy, native to some dreamy between world, and just visiting this one, vulnerable to danger, terrifyingly fragile and lovely, enchanting him because, in ancient times, the current of love between humans and fairies had run deep and strong, even though the price demanded for such joy had all too often been death. Definitely the Celtic in me. Her abilities might make her seem otherworldly, but Sarah was all too human, Tucker knew. Human enough to be very afraid of what she could see and the fact that she could see it. Human enough to be in pain, to want to withdraw even more when she was afraid, to push him further away, especially when he pushed her. He didn't want to push her. He didn't want to hurt her. Didn't want to see her fear and dread at the thought of deliberately trying to open doors she would much rather keep closed. And he definitely didn't like seeing her draw even farther away from him when he suggested she try. But Tucker was all too aware of time passing and even more conscious of how damnably little they knew. They needed to, had to, use their only real ace, and that was Sarah. If the other side was after her with such grim determination, because they either feared her or valued her, then Tucker thought the chances were very good that Sarah could use whatever it was they feared or desired against them. The question, of course, was whether she could do it, whether she could even try to do it. As much as he had learned over the years about psychic abilities and the paranormal, Tucker still felt very unsure about what to tell Sarah, about how to advise her. He was not psychic, and as he told her, he couldn't begin to feel what she felt. Not even his vivid writer's imagination could help him to help her. Until he had met her, he had seen in the world of the paranormal very little he'd believed to be genuine. And even the few psychics who had impressed him with their abilities had been erratic, not only in what they had been able to do, but in their interpretations of what they had seen and sensed. That was why he had, in the beginning at least, questioned Sarah's interpretations, but she seemed, so far, less erratic than those psychics had been, and far, far less likely to try to, quote-unquote, fill in the blanks of what she saw with hunches and outright guesses. Maybe that would come in time. Maybe every genuine psychic learned to create a patchwork of vision and guess and interpretation in order to present something complete and understandable to those inquiring. Maybe it was simple human nature. And then there were those things not so easily explained. She never wanted to be found, that's why you couldn't. A quiet statement offered in a quiet moment, as if it had simply come to Sarah without her bidding. A reluctant glimpse inside the mind of someone she did not know, had never known. Someone who had been gone for a very long time. Sarah had simply known. Her abilities, Tucker believed, were still new and raw, unformed in a sense. Unrestrained by the checks and guards and filters, her mind would no doubt struggle in time to erect. They might at this point be beyond her ability to control, but they were also undoubtedly powerful, and the force of them was undiluted by her conscious mind. Where an experienced psychic might try to interpret what was seen, Sarah merely reported it. This is what I see. This is what I know. When she looked, even absently without her full attention, she saw. He had to make her look no matter what it cost her. No matter what it cost him. The usual crowd populated Venice Beach, but it had been a slow day for Daisy Novak. Plenty of curious looks were directed toward her kiosk, but not many seemed eager to pay $20 to get their fortunes told. Absently, she polished her crystal ball with her sleeve and watched the people wander past. It was nearly dark, but there were plenty of lights around, and still plenty of people, and Daisy hesitated. She was stiff after sitting here so long. Damned arthritis. But just another $20 or so would mean she probably wouldn't have to work on Saturday. Another hour, then. But no longer. Her cat Moses would be waiting for his supper. She reached under the draped table and flipped the switch that turned on the light under her crystal ball. A nice effect, if she did say so herself. Especially since her kiosk was in one of the dimmer areas of the boardwalk. The light shone upward through the crystal, and she knew it made her face look nicely spooky and unearthly. And it was effective, too. Within minutes, a customer sat down on the other side of the table. $20 for 10 minutes, she pushed a bill across the table. Daisy smiled and slid the bill into her voluminous blouse. Yes, indeed. Do you have a preference, Megan? Tarot, palm reading, crystal ball. Megan blinked, then smiled. You're pretty good. She was young, in her 20s, and pretty, dressed as casually as everyone around her in shorts and a skimpy top. And she had that I dare you expression that Daisy easily recognized. Let's try out the ball. Automatically, Daisy cupped her hands around the base of the crystal and peered at it intently. Now she regretted turning on the light. The damn thing made her eyes water. Past, present, or future, she murmured. The crystal shows all. Suit yourself, Megan said. Daisy glanced at her, noticed the challenging expression, and felt irritated enough to reach a bit deeper than usual. So this one was a skeptic, was she? Well, then, Daisy would just give her her money's worth. Briskly, Daisy said, I see buildings with young people walking all around. Ah, you're a graduate student, economics. She sneaked a glance up and saw Megan blink again. Good, a direct hit. Single, but you have a boyfriend who is a musician. You spend weekends with him. Doesn't like the missionary position much, does he? Wants you to do all the work whenever possible. And he just bought a book with more positions illustrated for next weekend. Alright, that's enough about that. Megan's face was flushed, but there was an eager light in her eyes now. My future, what's my future? Daisy peered more intently, but she wasn't looking into the crystal. She was looking inward. I see a man. He's in the shadows. He's giving you something. Money. He's paying you. Daisy felt a chill spread through her and was only half aware that her voice had grown anxious. Don't, Megan. Don't go to him for your money. There's something wrong with him, with all of them. Don't become a part of their plans. They want you to do something bad. Helping them is a bad thing. Don't do it. She reached across the table instinctively to grasp Megan's hand and only then realized that the girl had fled. More than a little unnerved herself, Daisy turned off the crystal's light and packed up to go home. Geez, what had she seen? A guy in the shadows, a guy she'd felt was somehow not normal. This was California, for Christ's sake. Nobody was normal here. So why had it scared her so much? Daisy tried to push it out of her mind, but she was still nervous as she walked home, jumping at shadows and noises. She told herself to calm down, reminded herself that this was a safe route home and always had been. But that reading bothered her. She was half a block from home when a shadow loomed out at her from an alleyway, and she didn't jump quite fast enough. A hand like iron grabbed her arm and pulled her into the alley. Daisy should have screamed, but the moment he touched her, coldly terrifying images flooded her mind so vividly that they stole her breath. Hello, Daisy, he said gently. She looked up at his shadowy face, and in the moment granted to her for understanding, she suddenly knew what he was. Oh my gosh, she whispered. She never saw the knife. By noon the next day, Tucker's laptop was sorting through the most recent download of media information and official reports, which left him and Sarah with nothing to do. They had both awakened early, breakfasted quietly, and said little to each other during the hour since. It had been agreed that they would remain here until early afternoon, leaving this hotel and continuing their journey to the next stop, Syracuse. That destination was not so arbitrary as it may seem. One of Tucker's tasks this morning had been to begin putting together a list of psychics living in the Northeast, and the first name on that list belonged to a man who lived in Syracuse. Since that city was along their general route northward, they had decided to make that their next stop. Whether they contacted the psychic would be decided later. Why don't we go downstairs and have lunch in one of the restaurants? Tucker suggested as his laptop hummed quietly. You must be more than ready to get out of this room. Sarah, who had occupied herself by restlessly watching the news and mostly not watching one old movie on television, was definitely ready. That sounds good. They left the do not disturb sign on the door to prevent housekeeping from cleaning the room while they were gone. Tucker didn't want his laptop disturbed. Sarah found herself looking around warily as they crossed the vast lobby to one of the restaurants. But nothing awoke suspicion. Everybody around them looked and acted normal and unthreatening. But so did Sergeant Lewis. You're very quiet, Tucker said after they'd given their order to the waiter. Am I? Sorry. Her head no longer hurt, but that unsettling, pulsing sensation was still present. That heartbeat throbbed behind her eyes. You don't have to apologize for it, Sarah. Okay, she said absently. Is anything bothering you? I mean, anything in particular? She looked at him for a moment, then smiled impersonally and allowed her gaze to slide away and roam idly past the low wall defining the restaurant and out into the lobby. No, not really. The restaurant was fairly busy and the lobby more so. She watched people moving about, many of them wearing business suits and name tags, as they clustered in the various seating areas and walked briskly toward whatever seminars they were due to attend in the nearby meeting rooms. Are you sure? You seem a bit preoccupied today. Do I? One man caught her attention, and it didn't surprise her that he would have. He was extraordinarily handsome, for one thing, and despite what she thought was a scar down his left cheek. Very distinctively, his black hair sported both a widow's peak and a streak of pure white at the left temple. He was clearly powerful physically, broad-shouldered and athletic, and more than one passing woman did a double take. He was sitting alone in a seating area designed for two. The second glass on his table, mute indication that he was not as alone as he appeared. He was looking around idly, much as Sarah was, and for an instant she caught his gaze. His eyes were very pale in that almost coldly handsome face, and though they flickered very briefly with interest when they rested on her, Sarah's reaction was more ambivalent. One of these things is not like the others. Sarah? She looked at Tucker, trying to ride out the fleeting surge of panic. She was not afraid of the stranger, she realized. She didn't recognize him as an enemy. No, her reaction had been more nebulous than that. He was just wrong, out of place somehow. God damn it, will you talk to me? About what? It wasn't until Tucker sat back and stared across the table at her with a certain amount of frustration that Sarah realized how she was acting. She shook her head. I'm sorry, really, Tucker, I'm just unsettled today. Do you know why? It's nothing I can put my finger on. She glanced back toward the dark stranger to find that an equally handsome female companion had joined him and had his full attention. To Tucker she added, just jumpy, I guess. I didn't sleep very well. He was silent for a few moments while the waiter returned with their with their drinks, then frowned and said, have you tried to focus on the jumpiness? I'm just tired, that's all. Sarah? He leaned toward her, resting his forearms on the table and holding her gaze steadily. I read somewhere that using psychic abilities is like listening. Have you tried that? Lightly, she said, all I hear is a fairly noisy hotel lobby, and somebody just dropped a dish back in the kitchen. Since that crash had been evident to everyone in the restaurant, Tucker barely wasted a nod. Shut out all the sounds. Listen for what's underneath. She broke the hold of his gaze and looked down to find that she had unconsciously crumbled half a breadstick. Brushing the crumbs into a neat pile, she said, I can't hear anything. You aren't trying. I told you, I'm tired. You can't afford to be tired, Tucker said, his voice suddenly hard. If listening will help keep you alive, you have to listen. Sarah refused to look at him. "I've told you, it hurts. Can't you understand that?" Very quietly, Tucker said, "I think you have a choice. Hurt a little now to save your life, or avoid the pain now and die the death you saw for yourself." "Then that's my choice to make, isn't it?" She drew a breath and let it out slowly. "Destiny, fate, is it really my choice?" Whatever Tucker might have said in response was prevented by the return of their waiter with the meal. But when they were alone again, he said, "I'm in this now too, Sarah, don't forget that." He didn't say anything else, and neither did Sarah. And she didn't taste the meal she ate, though she ate as much as she could of what was on her plate. The pressure behind her eyes throbbed. They didn't linger in the restaurant, and they both remained silent as they crossed the huge lobby to the bank of elevators. Sarah noted absently that the handsome dark man seemed even more enthralled by his lovely companion, since he was smiling at her in a way that would cause any woman's heart to stop. She envied them their simple closeness. Tucker unlocked the door to their room and went in first, automatically cautious. But it was Sarah who saw what was different. On the desk beside the still humming laptop was a lovely vase of cut flowers. Sarah found a card among the blooms and studied it in silence for a moment before handing it to Tucker. The message was simple. "Welcome to Cleveland."